everyone. Welcome to episode 168 of Manage the Wild. I'm Nick Madsen. Today I went hiking with my family, and they wouldn't make up their minds, just like my wife. They let me pick the trail because they wanted to complain about it later. And that's exactly what happened. While we were hiking, I stayed on the trail, but then I asked them if they wanted to bushwhack on the way home. They readily agreed until they saw what we had to go through. We had a steep incline of several hundred feet at the first, and then we had a big drop in elevation, roughly 1,000 feet in less than a quarter of a mile to work down through. By the time we got done, they weren't very big fans. While I was going down, though, the hillside, I had this epiphany that podcast titles are like picking locations to use the bathroom in the outdoors. There's a lot of different topics. There's a lot of different places to use the bathrooms, but not all of them are great or even usable. That's often the situation I find myself in when I'm trying to pick topics to discuss as I go throughout my day. There are multitudes of things, whether I'm on the river guiding or whether I am out doing habitat work. I come across a whole bunch of topics. Sometimes I pick really good ones, and other times it's like picking a bad bathroom spot. You just get it on your shoes. So today it was kind of interesting. I was thinking about, I was out raking a bunch of grass hay. So we're getting ready to bale all that grass hay, and we're going to harvest it and use it for the winter feeding program to feed all the wintering elk. And so while I was sitting on the tractor, I was thinking about those fawns that I saw the other day and the does out in the grass. And I started thinking about why they chose that location. In the book Ecology and Management of Black-tailed and Mule Deer of North America, I came across a section where it talks about some of the requirements that they need throughout the day. Now, temperatures where they can reduce the amount of energy loss is between negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And within that range, they can conserve a lot. But if it drops below negative 4 or it goes higher above 77, then they have to start doing some different things, whether it's burning a lot of energy to stay warm or finding water and those things to cool down. So some of the locations the mule deer find themselves here in northern Utah is in areas where water may not be readily accessible. We have some areas that it's very hot. And so when they are picking their bedding grounds, they are looking for locations that are going to reduce the amount of exposure to that sun. So in the areas that I saw the fawns located, they were in the thickest part of the grass, where it was almost 3 feet tall. And after looking at the area that they were bedded in that tall grass, I put my hand down on the soil near the area where they had been bedded, at least the general area, and the soil was still moist, even though it hadn't rained in a few days, as well as we were no longer irrigating on that area. And so the mother and the fawn are doing a pretty good job of making sure that this fawn is staying cool. So there's different things that they are constantly looking for to reduce their exposure. So when they are selecting their bed sites, some of the things they want to protect against is that radiation. Obviously, they're not going to bed down next to a granite boulder in the summertime because it's going to radiate so much heat and they're just going to be cooking. They're going to try to get into the deepest, darkest vegetative areas, but still also provide good lookout. And so they have very specific requirements that they're looking for. There have been some studies where They were looking at different bed sites and some of the things, and they noticed that in mixed brush and aspen and conifer families, they were selecting those type of beds during the summer because of where those mixed conifer stands, as well as the aspen stands. They were picking those areas because of how they were located on the terrain. And often when they selected those sites, there was a bunch of updrafting, so there was quite a bit of air movement. And they also call them microclimates, where the surrounding area may be hot outside, but within that area that they were bedded, the temperatures were quite cooler. And so they do have special things that they're looking for. They also found that ponderosa pine stands, they were also selected during the day because of the temperature and the cover blocking that direct sunlight, as well as cooling down their bodies. And so they weren't needing the same amount of requirements had they been out in the sagebrush open. You remind me of a time where I was doing a wildlife study on a dump, a landfill. They were putting a landfill in, and they wanted to know what type of animals were in the area before the landfill. And then a couple of years later, they're going to come back and do some studies to find what animals have moved in. Namely, there was no raccoons or rats or skunks really in this area, and they want to know after they bring the landfill in, is that what's going to happen? And people largely think yes. But while I was out doing my predator plots, we'd take these 2x2 plots of sand, and we would collect the tracks of the animals. We had these little pellets for bait, and they would bring the predators in. They would step in the middle of these plots to try and sniff the pellet, and then they would take off and they would leave a track. But while I was in the area, it is pretty flat. There's some rolling hills, and you wouldn't think there's any deer out there. But there was these large irrigation canals, and they would cut into the sides of these rolling hills, and they would undercut in some areas, leaving these almost cave-like areas within the irrigation ditch. And that's a lot of the time in the middle of the day where we would find mule deer. So they are actively selecting for sites where they are going to be protected from direct sunlight, as well as a lot of air movement and cooler temperatures. All right, you guys, have a great day. Stay wild.